Good evening and welcome to the New York State Vaccine Equity Fireside Chat. My name is Louise Square and I'm the Health Equity Coordinator for the New York State AIDS Institute. I'll be your moderator for the evening. Let's do a quick overview of what the hour will look like. During a welcome, and there will be housekeeping tips. We'll have opening remarks, a panel discussion with questions from the audience, and a closing statement and thank you. Next slide, please. Housekeeping. To ask a question, thank you to those of you that submitted a question in advance. We will address as many questions as we can within the time constraints of the program. And to submit a question during the program, please email COVID-19 vaccine equity at health.ny.gov. Now we will have opening remarks from Joanne Moore, the director of the AIDS Institute at the New York State Department of Health.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining this important discussion. This event is one in a series of fireside chats that we have been hosting to complement the work of the New York State COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Task Force. The task force is comprised of a number of individuals who serve as key subject matter experts across the state and are charged with developing a toolkit to aid in vaccine uptake in communities of color, the creation of culturally competent public service announcements, and identifying vaccine sites to help meet all populations where they are. On behalf of all the task force members, I am incredibly thankful to see so many of you were able to join this evening. As many of you know, health experts have projected that in order to win the war against COVID-19, between 75 and 85% of the population will need to receive the vaccine, and as such, New York has made it a top priority to ensure that vulnerable and underserved communities are not left behind. At the end of the day, we will have not accomplished our mission in achieving herd immunity if we leave any one population behind. This evening's conversation will focus on vaccine facts, building trust, and how vaccine equity applies to the LGBTQ community. As the director of the New York State Department of Health AIDS Institute and a member of the COVID-19 vaccine team, as well as having a background in social work and psychology, this conversation is near and dear to my heart. I've noticed that over the past year, as we've moved forward in our understanding and in our work towards reducing the risk of COVID-19, we have also found our way to using certain labels or phrases, vaccine hesitancy being one of those. I want to encourage us to engage in tonight's discussion and to leave this discussion thinking about how we can move away from terms like vaccine hesitancy and move to a place of wanting to educate others so that people can make informed decisions about vaccination. In the work that we do in the AIDS Institute, much of our foundation is based on the principle of harm reduction. Harm reduction being the ability to meet people where they are, recognizing that our ideals may not always align with the person in front of us, but accepting and understanding that each person is their own expert. And so when you think about harm reduction, what you are thinking about is making the opportunity for people to receive the information to make an informed decision based on their readiness in that moment. Not everyone might accept the vaccine today, but we have the ability and the opportunity to make sure that consideration will be given and perhaps accepted at a different time. Our goal and our discussion for tonight is about breaking down the myths, addressing medical distrust, and the essential steps that we must take in order to be successful in our efforts to provide access, information, and vaccination to all New Yorkers. We have heard countless times about the importance of ensuring that community leaders and trusted messengers share important information about vaccines that are now available. And so, this evening, we have convened a group of experts to speak directly to you and answer the questions that you may have. We hope that you find tonight's discussion informative, and we thank our incredible speakers and all of you for your attendance and your participation. Together, we will bring an end to COVID-19 and will continue to move forward in rebuilding our communities. Thank you.
We'd like to thank Ms. Moore for her opening comments and for setting the stage. So I'm really excited for this opportunity to have a conversation with three highly respected leaders on the forefront of our efforts to ensure equity and improve health outcomes for all LGBTQ plus communities. All our distinguished guests have extensive and impressive bios, so we condensed them for the sake of time. First, let me introduce Tandra Legrone. She's the Chief Executive Officer at In Our Own Voices, a national nonprofit working to ensure the physical, mental, spiritual, political, cultural, and economic survival and growth of LGBTQ communities of color. She's a member of the New York State Minority Health Council and has served on the Capital Region Albany Police Department Reinvention and Reform Collaborative. Tandra has been an advocate for HIV/AIDS treatment in the African American community, especially for women and young Black men, for over 32 years. Next slide, please. Dr. Ferry Milano serves as the Vice President of Infectious Disease and LGBTQ programs at Community Health Care Network in New York City. In his capacity as Vice President, he started one of the city's first HIV counseling and testing programs. He also created and continues to innovate with the Community Health Network Conference on Transgender Health, now in its 10th year. Dr. Milano is an advocate for the needs of minority populations such as the LGBTQ plus community, underserved youth, people of color, people who use drugs, undocumented immigrants, and is a strong ally for transgender care and access to healthcare in general. Ace Robinson is a director of strategic partnerships and head of the Center for Ending the Epidemics of NMAC, formerly known as the National Minority AIDS Council. Ace is the leading administrative and policy HIV advocate and population health expert. He serves communities disproportionately impacted by HIV, COVID-19, and other associated illnesses through NMAC. In addition, Ace acts as chair for the Federal AIDS Policy Partnership. Thanks to all of you for being here. During our conversation, we plan to talk about the information many of us still need to make informed decisions about vaccination, including exploring historical context and the science behind the COVID-19 vaccine. We're inviting our guests to share knowledge as well as their experiences. Most importantly, we want to share information with participants that will help them in their decision-making process. We only have a short time to be with you, so we're going to jump right into the discussion. So I'm going to start with my first question. Thank you again for being here. How does the COVID-19 vaccine prevent someone from becoming infected? How effective are the vaccines, and how long will the vaccines provide protection? And I know that's a multi-part question, but let's start with Dr. Milano. You're on mute, Dr. Milano.
Thank you everyone for being here, and thanks for the questions and the invitation. COVID-19, as we all know, is a virus that has got the best part of our lives in the last year. And how to become infected? That's the chance of every day for us to make sure that we maintain the distances, that we use the proper mask, and now that we had the latest tool on fighting the pandemic, which is the vaccine. I think that we have gone through many layers of misinformation and myths, and now we know that the vaccination is available. The vaccination will produce antibodies, memory cells that will help us to remember the virus when we get in contact the next time and fight the infection off.
Thank you, Dr. Milano. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
So really quickly, I just want to go through some very vital components. So COVID-19 is a respiratory illness. So it's a SARS virus. As we know that you've probably remember hearing about SARS viruses in previous years. And the term COVID-19 is a fancy way to say this is a particular type of virus that was identified in 2019. Now, the very important part of that part of the conversation is with most respiratory viruses. If you are exposed to a respiratory virus and you live through, like it infects you, then you're going to have some problems, and then you're going to eventually get better. And now remember like how things work when you kept hearing about those antibodies that people were getting that really helped them if after clearing the virus, after they got better from the virus, they made it much harder for you to acquire the virus again. So you'd always hear, oh, check to see if you have antibodies. That's what we would say at the beginning. Now let's talk about what vaccines are. I began my career as a virologist. I used to work on HIV vaccine development. And I was really focused on how are we going to look at how the body can actually prevent illness if exposed to a virus. So think very similar to like when you were a child. Many of those who are younger had the chickenpox. And then what your body did, and your immune system remembered what happened inside the body. It like developed this antibodies, and those antibodies just kind of hung out. They didn't really do anything. It didn't take up too much energy. But if you were exposed to somebody with the chickenpox up to like 10 years later, maybe up to 30 years later, you acquired it, but you didn't get sick. That meant that you still had the virus, but your body took care of it once and for all. So what we're doing with vaccine development, which is very important because this is not new. The COVID-19 is a new virus, but vaccine development is not new. So what is it doing? You'll hear the term spike protein. You hear a lot of these special medical terms, but what all that means is that they're trying to make sure that your immune system simulates a response as if you were exposed to the virus. And then if you are actually exposed to the virus, you actually don't get sick. You might see a lot of times people talk about, oh, like what's happening with the virus. And the one data point that is always true is that everyone who has taken the vaccine thus far has not died from COVID-19, which is very important. Not saying that no one acquired it, but it never progressed and got stronger, which is a very important conversation about what a vaccine is and what it can do for your future. So not only does it protect you, but because the virus doesn't become so strong in your body, it actually makes it more difficult to pass it on to another person. And that's why we always want to say like, it's like everything from washing your hands and covering your mouth and all those things are very important. But why adding the next layer of a vaccine makes it so important, not just for your health, but for the health of those around you, the people you love, the people you work with. We want to make sure that this pandemic can stop and that we utilize all the tools that are available to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ace.
And Ace, and thank you for being very specific that this is not new. And I know there's going to be, I'm Tandra Legrone, the CEO of Interim Voices, and that I know we're going to have a further conversation about the technology, and this is not new. And specifically that we know that there are two vaccines that are made up of messenger mRNA, and I will get a little bit more into that, which is a technology that delivers codes to our cells to react to the COVID vaccine, to COVID-19. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those messengers and the codes, because it's important for folks to understand. And the reason why I'm repeating this, because it's really, really important to understand this is not new. As Ace said, COVID-19, a form of SARS, is new, but the technology is not. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And I think Ace, you covered a little bit about how effective the vaccines are. But do we want to talk a little bit about how long the vaccines can provide protection?
Okay, sure.
And I kind of know that's a loaded question, but I wanted to bring it up.
Well,
So,
I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to jump in because I just want to swing back, Louisa, and maybe Ace can swing back to the percentages of how it's,
Effectiveness?
yes, effectiveness. Thank you for that.
Oh, so let's go one by one. There are 3 approved vaccines in the United States by the FDA. And now remember, the FDA is an independent federal body that is not does not have oversight from any politicians, because we wanted to make sure that it's very clear that there is no one in any particular position, like a president or a senator or anything like that, that can tell the people in the FDA what to do. That is very important to say, that this is an independent body, that everything that they come up with is clear and honest and reviewed, just in the same way that we did all this work, and those of us from the HIV field, why it was so important to have those conversations. So let's go through the 3. You have Moderna, you have Pfizer, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now with Moderna and the Pfizer, those are a 2-step vaccine process. You go in, today is the 18th of March. You get a vaccination for Pfizer. In 21 days, you have to get that booster shot to make sure that you're going to have a good, robust response. You start getting a little bit of a response at the beginning, but then when we talk about this 95%, and this is statistics, so we're not going to go really deep into statistics, but what we're saying is that the great vast majority of individuals who have had the Pfizer vaccine and the booster and have waited like a couple more days, like a couple more weeks, to make sure that your body gets really, really strong with its antibodies, it makes it nearly impossible for you to like, you might acquire, but you will never get sick from it. Moderna also is a 2-step vaccine. There's a slight difference with this one in that you get your first one, like say March 18th, but then you have to wait 28 days as opposed to the 21 days. You wait 28 days for your booster. And during that time period, yes, you have partial protection, but you need that booster to get that final last little bit of like how you're going to get to that 95%. Now, what we've seen recently, the most recently approved one in the United States of America is Johnson & Johnson. That is just a 1-step vaccine. You go in, you get your shot, and you keep moving. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the initial protective levels are in the mid to high 60 percentile. And then what we have seen is that over 60 days, that keeps increasing depending on the person, almost to the same level as the others. So after, they all level out at around 2 months. But one thing you want to be very clear on is that, yes, there are 3 different ones. Yes, there's different time rates for having that efficacy. But right now we do not have, you don't go to your local corner store and say you're choosing between the 3. You might only have an option of one, and that one is the best option for you. That one is the best option for you to ensure that those individuals, that the people that you care about, the people around you, are not going to, you're not going to get sick. You're not going to have a lot of virus. And a lot of virus means that you can pass it on to another person. In the HIV land, we say undetectable equals untransmittable. Is very much the same thing with the flu. Everything you think about that, you're trying to make sure that something is not going to be passed on to another person. They come with some side effects. And the people who have side effects, we've seen that those are the individuals who have a really robust immune system. Yes. We were talking beforehand, of course, about oh, I got this, and what was your side effect?
Right.
When I had my vaccine, I had no side effects because, I'm that person that if you have a cold and I share a spoon with you, I'm going to be the one who's sick in bed. My immune system's pretty weak, so it doesn't really do anything. Some people have really strong immune systems. You know, that person who never gets the flu and they've been hanging out with everybody with the flu, Those people, when their body sees this, they're all like, oh, what's going on? And it gets you get a fever and you get tired and all these responses. And those people I consider are lucky because COVID-19 aside, they are also going to be protected against other things. And so, me, I just need to live inside my bubble and make sure that no one around me has the flu or Ebola or any of the other fun stuff.
And that's a very good point is, my partner, took Moderna in December, and really had yeah, that the side effects, as you said, it's doing its job, and actually you want folks to have that experience, really, to the side effects to be kind of on a more extreme level, because that means the body is doing its job. um, but the other thing that you mentioned, it is what is the one that is available to you is the one that you want to take. And so so if someone calls you, or you get access to or have the opportunity to get vaccinated, and that particular pod or that particular organization has, let's say, Johnson and Johnson or Pfizer or Moderna, it take whatever is available to you if you want to be vaccinated. And it's, as A said, it's really about how you're going to not only protect yourself, but protect others. And something is better than nothing at all.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I want to add that these vaccines were tested in thousands of people. Every single time that there's a clinical trial, they have a good variety and diversity of subjects, people taking the vaccine. They study the side effects, they study the effectivity of the vaccine, how it works within the immune system before they even go into the phase 3, submitting to the FDA. And as Ace mentioned before, the FDA is one of the several organizations that work with the organization, and that they try to bring science, not just anecdotal, but science, numbers, medical, clinical facts. And they decided what is a very rigorous panel before they approve. And in many cases, the product is not approved. Sometimes the severity of the illness is mimicking the way that the actual COVID-19 happens with the side effects. But the difference is that your body is working on building those antibodies, building those protections against the disease. And one of the things that is really important is when we talk about respirators and we talk about the vaccine, it's a big difference. One of my friends said this week in New York hospital these days, working with the vaccination these days. As tired as it is better than start looking for respirators. Keeping that in mind, it always kind of help to decide, yes, I need that vaccine in my body.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all for those really important answers. We have a question from our audience. Megan?
Hi, Louise. We had a question from Catherine who wanted to know, what are the top strategies being implemented to increase vaccine uptake among underserved populations across the state, both rural and urban?
So I can answer. Is it Catherine? Is that the person? Hi, Catherine.
Yep, Catherine.
So I know in the capital region, for instance, and I also sit on the New York State Health Minority, and that the New York State equity for the vaccine. So here in the capital region, we learned that pretty much 98% in category A and B folks that were not minorities or people of color were being vaccinated to the rate of, at that point, 4% people of color in 1A and 1B. And I tell you, that's all the info. We took that data and we came up with a strategy. What we call is our village. And who sits on our village is 8 o'clock, 8:30 every Wednesday. We have a meeting at 8:30 in the morning, a strategy meeting. It is with the mayor, common council members. We have folks from the community, council ward folks, all and community leaders. We come together and we have clear conversations of how we're going to hold folks accountability to get this vaccine out. And when I say a village, it literally takes a village. I had the opportunity yesterday to do a pod at Inner Arm Voices that specifically focused on LGBT people of color. And it took a army to pull that together of volunteers and educators, the mayor, Albany Medical Center. We had all of these forces that were working together. So to answer your question, it takes really a village of people to come together and to also acknowledge that it is that there is disparity. When you look at the data, there's disparity. Be honest about it and form a village to be able to go out and educate people and address where are the disparities. I've walked through pods and watched their operations. And was able to give feedback of how they could increase and the outreach they could do to communities of color and other minority communities. And we had folks we came down where we had mothers of the church and folks like Wanda Willingham and Carolyn McLaughlin, Dr. Dorcia Pleers. They worked in tangent with community. They started their own list. And sometimes if you're not being invited to the table, you have to build your own. And they began to building their own way of how they were going to make sure that there were equitable vaccines given to communities and also the rural areas as well. So I'll go back to the advocacy piece, pulling people in and advocating on all different systems to make sure that this is happening. So I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
that answer your question, Catherine. I don't know if anyone else, Ace, Dr. Freddie?
Yeah, I think it's very important to really work with the community leaders. I always confide in what I call the gatekeepers. It's a bad word, but the pastors, they know who are coming into the congregations, the bodega owners, and from the LGTB community, we do have those leaders that know where the people go for food, where the people go for meetings, where the people go for Zooms. Get involved in, and let's try to bring education, because the reality is that with this vaccine, it has been a lot of misinformation, a lot of wrong information, and it's part of our job is to clarify, put the information in simple words without the medical jargon, and in a way that the community will understand what it is. I love the way that Ace put that before, how the vaccines works. And I think that that's something that we need to get away from the technicality and provide simple, basic information people will be able to understand, bring home, and see the need for the vaccination. We have seen a shift on the saying no to the vaccine to looking for us and what is the next, when can I get the vaccine? And I think that by demystifying the technicalities and making easier and working with the community in a one-to-one basis, we can do a lot of reversal, because we know that the most affected, at least in New York City, a year ago, we started losing members of the transgender community. We lost a lot of people from the Black community. We lost a lot of people from the Hispanic community. And now, rather than blame, we have to be our own advocates, but at the same time, we have to be mindful on many of us getting lost on the medical technicalities and making this very difficult to understand. So I urge everyone to get the education that you can get and make it simple, make it easier to talk to your friends, to talk to your patients, to talk to your minister, and just disseminate that information. It helps.
Thank you. So one of the reasons I was so excited to be invited, first off, thank you for the organizers for inviting me and for this conversation, but why this conversation was so vitally important. There's a term we use in public health called intersectionality.
Mhm.
And what does that mean? That means that everyone carries more than one card when they go through the door. So like I'm going through and I know that I'm a racial minority. I identify as gay. I know that I'm a sexuality minority. There are individuals who are gender nonconforming, people who are binary, transgender, masculine or transgender women, people who are gender nonconforming, people who are not, somewhere in the middle of the gender spectrum. And when we talk about COVID-19, we're talking about that intersection of all of the pieces that make people and their lived experiences. And those lived experiences really impact health seeking behaviors, meaning, am I going to go see a doctor as soon as possible? Do I even know where to go see a doctor? Do I have time to go see a doctor? And we could start having the conversations that have occurred previous in fireside chats. We know that last hired, first fired. We know that Black individuals, Indigenous individuals, people of color, Latinx individuals are not, when it comes to job security, are quite often the least secure in our country. We know that individuals who are living in situations like there's multiple people in a household, we know all the pieces that really make COVID-19 really driving in BIPOC communities. But the one piece that we have to speak about, and thank you, Tanya, for bringing this up, is specifically to the LGBTQ plus community. And when we're talking about the needs of the LGBTQ plus community, we have to speak about what is the one difference that a lot of those individuals have. They have different experiences in the medical field. When we speak about over 50% of people who identify as gender nonconforming have been discriminated against and report discrimination in healthcare centers. When you speak specifically about Black transgender women, and when in the HIV field, we know the intersection of racism, sexism, and homophobia and transphobia sits in their body when they just try to go to the grocery store. That doesn't stop at the grocery store. It also goes into health clinics where over 75% will report being discriminated against in a center. And that's compared to 20% of people who are LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual identified compared to the gender minorities. And then so we did a lot of work, and thank goodness for the folks at the Kaiser Family Foundation. They did a lot of deep work that we needed to really dive into. We understand that because of all these things, when it comes to job security, trying to navigate as a BIPOC individual, then on top of that, trying to identify as a queer individual, when it talks about brain health and depression, dementia, so on and so forth, half of individuals since the pandemic who are LGBTQ plus identified have said that they have having a brain health emergency, depression, schizophrenia, and so forth, compared to 1/4 of the non-LGBTQ plus community. That 75% of people who are LGBTQ plus identified have said that, oh, I'm very worried about people in my household, people in my family groups. And then also talking about are the vaccines made to protect people? Because we are a chosen family as opposed to a biological one, we are looking out for each other in ways that some people haven't. And specifically in New York, for individuals who have survived the AIDS epidemic, people who are really trying to survive all these different epidemics of racism and so on and so forth. We look at vaccines, like the LGBTQ plus community states that vaccines protect us and my loved ones at 3/4. 75% will identify that way, whereas about half of non-queer people say the same thing. So we have to be very upfront that yes, we understand as queer people that this is a very important conversation and that this is a need. But how am I going to get it? Like when Tangera and Freddie are having their clinics, are the clinics not only welcoming, but are they inviting? Are we having those conversations about myths and misconceptions that are so prevalent in the BIPOC communities? Not by luck. This was all this is all earned behavior from our pharmaceutical and our clinical field. Just looking at the history, it's called survival. Why you might distrust either one of those. That's what happens. But then when you add that extra layer, okay, I finally trust that I need this. Where am I going to go to get it? Where are you going? Are you going to?
That's a very good point, because we were very specific and we collaborated with the Black Nurses Coalition. And so we have Black nurses that were on hand to give out shots. And we also had other medical folks, but it was important for folks to see that face. And the person who was checking you in, was a Black gay man. And we were clear in how we laid out the design, and we worked my staff, I'm going to say my staff, who are phenomenal, worked very hard on that layout and that outreach plan, and to make sure. And we and it's funny that you bring that up, because it was a kind of a no brainer for us, but for the comments and a text that I received later from community saying, I don't think that I didn't know, excuse me, I didn't know that, first of all, there was going to be a person of color check me in, but that a person of color was going to give me the vaccine, and the person who monitored, the observation person, and it's important, and that we had other community members that understood that what it meant for that to happen. So thank you for saying that. I really, really appreciate that.
So thank you both. I mean, we have a passionate panel, and I knew that this discussion was going to be great. Um, but already have like just 20 minutes left. So I just want to move us, and Ace, you actually answered my next question. So I'm going to go to Megan and for a fresh question from the audience.
Hi, Louise. We had a question from Jackie, who wanted to know, are there any ambassadors or community influencers from the LGBTQ plus community that are doing this kind of community outreach?
Any of you can answer.
Yes, they are. We just have to find them. In New York, for instance, we have a great ambassador, which is Cecilia. Uh, access to vaccinations. And also within the local boroughs, I have seen groups like Colectivo Transgrediendo in Queens. And also we have the Destination Tomorrow in the Bronx. And then, I mean, you really have to work, and that's why you need to join the local organizations. And if not, let's ask the leaders. I'm not a political oriented person, but I am a community organizer, and I try to work with people in the community. And if not, you don't identify one, just take a look at the mirror and look at yourself, because you could be the one person who's going to start that movement in your community. That sounds, because I don't remember who said that sometimes when you don't have the
Mhm.
place at the table, you have to make a space. And I go a little further. You have to bring your own chair, and you have to bring your own plate. So that's the way that I see myself as a gay man in many forms. When there is no room for us, we need to make the space, bring the plate, and make sure that we start the movement.
So in
Thank
the
you.
in the capital region, I am so proud. We have the House of Precise, and the reason I'm going to just say the reason why I'm proud is because that the House of Precise, who the founder, London Precise, reached out to Inner Own Voices and was like, I have some kids in my house, and I want to bring them and make sure that they are vaccinated. But in building leadership and making sure we support folks, we didn't take over that process. It is, here's the information, get it back to us. And from our perspective of for influencers, and I feel that that London is a huge influencer and a collaborative with the Neural Voices in the capital region. And to be able to do that boots on the ground work, because we can't reach everyone. And we can't say that we sit as or CBO grassroots organizations that we are reaching everyone. Things change, and faces change. So I'm glad that the question around influencers, because we have huge influencers that are on Facebook, that are on Instagram, that have impact on our community, and we need to figure out ways that we could collaborate with them and more intentionally, and not when something kind of in passing come up, but bringing them at the beginning of the process and planning with them and making room at our own table to say, here's a seat at the table, and how do you want to do this? And Joanne mentioned earlier around harm reduction, and a part of that is honoring where people are at, and the second piece of it is not trying to have people to fit into our deliverables and how we have to meet our grant deliverables and all this other stuff, but finding other ways to be creative with them. And so I just mentioned that because I want to give a shout out to the House Precise as well.
Thank
And
you.
I love influencers. Freddie and I have gray hair. So, so there's this whole thing about like how in touch we are with like some of the great influencers out there. I like learn about these people from folks I work with, like the woman who got all the awards the couple nights ago, Megan the Stallion. And like, we know in New York City, like how much she did to support people who were working in the COVID-19 IC wards, making sure that they got the support they need, speaking about why was it so important to have these conversations. You look at the TikTok videos. Yesterday, I was in a great conversation with a superstar in the social media field, Jazz Florentino, was speaking with some folks at UC about like, oh, this is how you're going to do this video and da-da-da. You're going to like do your click-throughs and, talking on this language I didn't understand, but speaking a language that most of the youth who are spending all day flipping through TikTok understand, and understanding like when you use Instagram and when you use TikTok and how you're going to get to the communities that you have to serve. Because I mean, like there are just some great people out there who are really pushing the conversation forward in a way, because public health, we're horrible at marketing and communications, or both. Like we all work in HIV, the three of us, so we know how bad we were at education, especially to people who were not looking just like us. So like I love the influencers that are coming out who are really changing the game.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to move us to the next question. And the next question is, so gay men, particularly gay men of color, continue to be disproportionately impacted by HIV/AIDS, which compromises the immune system. Recently on February 15th, people living with HIV and AIDS became vaccine eligible under the New York State eligibility criteria. So why should people living with HIV and AIDS consider taking the COVID vaccine? And you talked a little bit about that, but I think we should drive that home a little bit.
Well, the reality is that a person living with HIV already has an immunocompromised system. There's already built-in deficiency of responses, proper responses rather. And now with the COVID-19, which is the respiratory affecting illness, it really can have a bigger impact in people living with HIV. Unfortunately, they did not include, not until October, did not include people living with HIV in the studies, in the clinical trials. And once that they decided to include them because they saw that people with HIV were having the worst outcomes when they got sick and they have to go to the emergency room or to the hospital, then they decided to include it. That kind of created yet another layer of discomfort, distrust, and people's reluctance to go for the vaccine. I'm an advocate of vaccines. I believe in vaccines. I come from South America. When every vaccine that is there, I will take it. And I continue to do that because I believe on them. However, I think that having the discrimination that we talked before in the 90s and the late 80s and the 90s about HIV, at one point last year, COVID was going that way and still is going that way sometimes. That the fact that you are exposed to COVID, it makes you infected immediately without realizing whether it's true or not. And people start walking away from you. And as a gay man, we see that discrimination and that rejection day after day after day at all levels. Even when we go to our medical providers, how many times do we get to talk about sexual practices that we do? And now the doctor is looking at us as a potential carrier of COVID. So again, the only way that we can counteract that is by providing information, by educating ourselves, educating our brothers and sisters, making sure that we include the transgender community. Because even with the LGBTQ plus, many occasions we don't talk about the transgender individuals. We have trans men, we have trans females, we have intersexual individuals that are exposed to the same thing that we are exposed, plus the fact that many of them are having transactional sex as a way of survival. And that increases the chances of getting exposed to the virus. So it's a historical background on the virus infection, but we need to continue with the education and we need to keep talking to our brothers and sisters to make sure that everyone finds it and make their business to go for the vaccine.
Thank you for bringing up what's happening with Black gay men in this country. When I was in New York, I was a South Bronx guy. And the one thing that, like when you look at the data doesn't lie. So many populations are either flatlining or decreasing in HIV incidence and morbidity. One group is still increasing. That's Black gay men ages 20 to 29. And if things are getting worse than they were 5 years ago for this population, meaning that's abject failure. Steady state means like, oh, you're kind of doing well. Decreasing means you're improving. You're still doing worse, and it's 2021. That's abject failure. And when you're looking at, this is the United States. Do not act like this is the best country in the world to be living with HIV. 45% of people living with HIV in the United States are not virally suppressed, do not have access to treatment. That means approximately half do not, right? And then when you start talking about Black gay men, the numbers of individuals who are not having sustained access to care, where it's whether it's society pushing on them, the clinics pushing on them, whoever's pushing them away, why we only have about 30% of young Black gay men virally suppressed. And then you mix in COVID-19, which is looking for someone who's immune compromised and not on treatment. People who are living with HIV and are in sustained treatment have really great health outcomes across the board, not just COVID-19, but across the board. Individuals who are not on treatment or are on and off of treatment do not have that same, without getting too emotional, do not have that same privilege. Because when we talk about the success around HIV, we're talking about half the people living with HIV in this country. And we already know who the other half look like. And that's the real issue that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Ace. So gonna move us on to the next question. We have about 10 minutes left, but I thank you for your responses. Number 12, there are many myths about COVID-19 vaccines. What's the single most common myth that you've heard, and something that maybe we haven't mentioned yet, and how do you address it if the question is asked of you?
Is this what the white people are getting? That is the one that I've heard the most. It doesn't matter when we did our listening session with Black women in Brooklyn, when we did the same thing with Latinx folks in Houston. That's always the number one question, is like, is the medication I'm getting the same thing that the rich white boys are getting? And that is the whole piece of trust, was like, well, always like, like the assumption that you're going to get second best, that like you're going to get, when we have conversations about, oh, do you get Tylenol or do you get acetaminophen? Do you get the Joy Reid brand, or do you get Tylenol, right? Generic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there's this thought that, oh, maybe we're not getting what's best. And that's the whole piece of the conversation that we have to really be honest with, and say like, yes, in this situation, I will vouch from top to bottom. Like, that piece of where you find people who look like you. When Dr. Kizzy Corbett was on every single Sunday morning show, a Black cisgender woman on the younger side talking about like, oh yeah, I'm one of the main people who developed, I think it was the Moderna, don't hold me to that, but I think it was the Moderna vaccine. Like having her go around and say that Like Tony Fauci will get up there and say, I'm an 80-year-old white man. Tony Fauci is a genius. All of us in HIV love him, but he will be very honest and say, I'm probably not the person who should be talking to a 25-year-old Latina about their healthcare. They won't. This just like there's not that instant level of trust.
Anybody else want to address the myth?
I think that one of the myths that I hear from some of my friends is that they are being injected as a way of tracking them because they were gay or because they were immigrants or because they were Black, because they were not wanted around here. And it was a mechanism of tracking people. I also hear that the vaccines, when they came out with the two vaccines, very interesting, that the Pfizer, it was more as a white vaccine, while the Moderna, it was more for the Black community and the Latino community. And when I started listening to these theories, the rationale was not there, but unfortunately, because we have political leaderships that were going, people listen to them, and there is no way that you can change that. I think that the other myth is because the way that the scheduling has been done. Why you talk to me about being having access to a vaccine when I don't have the qualifications for the next round? That has been a big myth that said they are trying to keep me away from the vaccination table. So why should I have it after all of this pushing? And when we talk about the supply and the demand and the inclusion of the people in the clinical trials, that really has been another disenfranchising factor for Black, Latino, and especially for gay, lesbian, transgender, intersexual, and all of the above in this community.
Thank you. Tandra, did you want to address any of that?
Sure. I hear Ace and Dr. Freddie, I hear the same thing. And I think the other one is that how quick this came out. I want to wait and see what happens with everyone else before I take the vaccine. This came out too quick. And part of our education and some of the part of harm reduction pieces that we're doing is that is like Ace said at the beginning, this is not new technology. And I appreciate in Joanne's opening addressing, and I know you will, Louisa, will ask this question around the hesitancy around this piece and the terminology. And I think I would challenge us to shift some of our language around that there's a skepticism around this, and rightfully so. And so I think the biggest one is this came out way too fast. Am I going to be sterile? It's going to change my DNA. I'm going to see who drops dead around me because it came out so fast. And so the piece of it that I am encouraging folks is, please do your homework and educate yourself. But also, when I'm having conversations with individuals, a one-on-one, and I have these conversations and I challenge them and I inform them, well, that's not true. And, and here's the data to back that up, that it's not true. And here is the thing. And then there's this narrative that is going around as well that really speaks to suppressing our right to information. So if this information is going out and then it begins to spread, my fear is that when we, we already are impacted by so many social determinants of health and so many other things, and that if we do hit this particular 70% to hit herd immunity, as folks know what happened with HIV, it is that, then, currently we have, Black gay men, that number has increased, it's never changed. And I've been doing this for 30 something years, and we're getting ready to look at 40 years of HIV in our community, and Black men numbers haven't changed. And my fear is going to be the same thing with the COVID, COVID virus, COVID-19, is that we'll get to a place, everybody else will have herd immunity, and we'll be at this place, and this will remain in our community, and it will stick around in our community. And every so often you'll hear, well, did you hear about Aunt so-and-so? Well, she died of COVID. And, it will have this effect, and it won't be a priority for folks as it is right now.
Well, we certainly hope that that's not the case, but
Yes. And
I hear, yeah, I hear what you're saying. We have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask our last question. I'm going to ask you guys to be really, really concise with your answers so that I can thank everybody for being here. So the LGBTQ plus community is a community that values, thrives, and finds support through in-person connection and celebratory occasions such as pride celebrations and the underground house, ball competitions. How has the LGBTQ plus community responded to the quarantine, the gathering restrictions throughout the year, and what might the vaccination rollout mean to the community?
I will be quick.
Somebody hit me with 30 seconds of talk.
We did it gaily. We did it with colors. We are adaptable. We will find a way to celebrate, and we will continue to find a way to celebrate. We had balls virtually. We had disco balls going, and people were creative, and we will still we are so resilient. We will find a way, and I'm looking forward to this year's celebrations as well.
Thank you. So Ace, you want to talk to how the vaccine rollout will change things and gathering again?
We'll continue leading. LGBTQ plus people leading on everything for, I don't know, since the beginning of time. So we're going to continue leading, looking at things that they're innovating. I love the Get Your Girl campaign, like get your girl, get your vaccine. Love that campaign. It's amazing. New York City, you guys did a great job of like alternative ways to have sex during COVID, because like you're not going to tell a 22-year-old that they can't have sex. It didn't work in 1981. It doesn't work in 2020. So, making sure that people like can still live their lives in a way that's safe and innovation. It's all about innovation, and we're doing it.
And we have to utilize the vaccine, the fact that we have 3 different vaccines today, as a motivation. So we can have to get the vaccine, so we can have a pride celebration in a smaller scale if we have to, continue to have a summer that we can be enjoying ourselves with our partners, with our lovers, sisters, and everyone. And we'll be all vaccinated by then. So I'm trying to use that as a, hey, you want to get together, we need to get the vaccine. We want to, it's a motivational individual thing, but in the long run, it will help us to regroup and to gain back all those things that we lost during the last year.
Thank you so much. I knew this panel was going to be exciting. You all are passionate, and you speak to us in a way that we can understand and what we need to know, and give us the information that we need to be informed about what the next step should be. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, for your time that you spent with us this evening, and for the information you shared, and even from your own experiences. Thank you, thank you, thank you. On the screen, you'll see that if you have additional questions, more information about what was shared today, just go to COVID-19 vaccine.health.ny.gov, and you can get more information there. So again, I want to thank our panelists for being here. Thank you for your passionate discussion. I want to thank all of our participants for being here. I hope this was informative for you, and it will help you make decisions if you have not already made decisions about getting your vaccine. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
I would just like to say thank you, Louisa, and your team, and Calvin, and everyone. It's amazing, and thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Freddy. Thank you, Ace. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Safe. And thanks.